was actually just protected by YouTube because I was actually referencing a word that'll get the stream canceled because that's a heavy word. But I'm actually reaching for some very nuanced points, so I'm going to continue with this line of thought. But what I was saying in this last one is that sometimes we have words. So part of warfare in fighting is that it's very difficult for a human being to injure another human being that they respect as a human being. So in order to do that, you have to call another person out of their name or less than human being. So one of like some of the words that people use about other people is to call them less than people. But what I was saying is that if you were to think of the most clever way to assassinate a person that would be difficult to reach, the first one would be to act like you're in some form of authority, right? So to act like law enforcement in order to actually injure a person while not being law enforcement. Another way would be to actually act like a woman, right? So like say you're walking down the street, right? So you're armed to the teeth, you're ready to go, you're trained to go. Anything that look like anything, you're ready to go ham like that, right? But would you appreciate someone actually walk up dressed like a woman, like actually really look like a woman, but had been the person that doesn't mean you well? You would either a woman or someone acting like a woman. That would be a closer way to get to someone. A yet closer way to get someone would be to act like a journalist, like asking questions like, so you're on the street like that, like say heaven forbid, right? Say I wanted to, like most people, like I was listening to someone online, like a fighter of some kind, and they were saying that like, yeah, man, like if I was ever out in public, if someone said something to my girlfriend, I would stick it to them right there, no questions asked. I would pummel that fool right there, right? Okay, so you would knock someone, you would cold cock someone, right? If they made a pass at your girlfriend on a date, right? But what about a journalist? So you're actually saying that to a journalist. You're a fighter saying to a journalist what you wouldn't do to someone that got out of pocket with your girlfriend, right? But what if that very journalist had got out of pocket with your girlfriend, right? So like, come on, hey, oh, you guys are on a date. Oh, that's so cute. Can I ask you a couple questions? This is my camera crew. So who are you guys? Where'd you guys meet? Oh, that's so cool. And what's her name? Oh, that's so cool. Hey, what do you think about this, right? So I got this, and that, right? So he got that'd be this. So now, if a regular nobody just came up and said, "Hey, what's up, man? Hey, man. So where did y'all meet at? Oh, what's your name, honey? Why you with your girlfriend?" That's a death match that they just got themselves into. But a journalist can do the same thing and get up right up on you and ask you a question, and you tell the journalist all they got, but you actually don't know what that journalist is made of or what they're on or what they mean to you, stuff like that. So this journalist got up to a drill instructor, and he was like, are y'all no more sturdy than a cupcake? Are y'all not baking cupcakes for these recruits like that?" So I'm saying that he fired off a real round, point blank range in they say the digital age, all since we've had fingers and toes, that your hands, the bones of your hands are called your carpals. The bones of your toes are called your tarsals. I mean, the bones of your hand are your carpals. The bones of your feet are your tarsals. Your fingers and your toes are your phalanges. Those are digits. And so we extrapolate numbers based on digits, but we've always been in a digital reality. So the current iteration is the digital reality. But so long as we've been in a digital reality, it's always been about information, even going way back. So when someone asks you a question, they're actually divulging whatever standpoint you have to preserve your existence and your allegiance to other people. It's upon information. So there's nothing that puts you the most heinous thing that can happen to anyone would be a function of information. So the best and the worst that can happen for someone is based on information. So if someone's asking you a question, they're asking you for your most prized possession, but also they're compelling you. But you would, so if a detective were to slam you for information, you can appreciate that you wouldn't want to tell them something. But if someone gives you a little bit of a compliment or honor by asking a question close to you, so that's what I'm just they would traverse the Moorish people would traverse between they were seafaring, right? We can appreciate that the Moorish people had landed in Spain, so they were seafaring up to at least and including Spain. Prior to the Spaniards being sturdy around seafaring, had been the Moors had been sturdy around seafaring. I don't think that's egregious to say, but according to Tashrik Bey, is that they were not limited to Africa. They were not. I think Europe is Europa, or like there's some there were melanated people in Europe called the Picts. Those are some of your melanated people in Europe. So there's actually not a real there's not a real delineation between Africa, Asia, and Europe in the oldest sense, as can be attested by some of the monuments. Like there are pyramids upon Africa, Europe, Africa, and Europe. There are pyramids there, and Asia also. But then also there are melanated people upon Africa, Asia, and Europe, including the Picts of Europe. Also, there are melanated people and pyramids upon the Americas. According to Tashrik Bey, that none of that is delineated. So the Moorish people, at least, would be not limited to Africa, not limited to Europe, and not exempt from America, according to Tashrik Bey. So when you say the Native Americans, the people of the earth are one people, is what I'm saying, and they had not been limited in terms of geography at any point, including not limited by the sea, according to Tashrik Bey. But but so but that the pilgrim. So first of all, you could say that the pilgrims were able to leave Europe is actually, that in itself is already a blessing of the indigenous people, not least of which the Moorish people of what's called Africa or Asia Minor, uh, traversing to Europe, enlightening them. I think that I can't quote this verbatim, but I think they were responsible for lending understanding of sewage. I think that some of the realities of, like, say, the bubonic plague. I'm just going to keep rolling with this. Sometimes we think that all of medicine came from Europe. Like we think that Western medicine has the be all end all about health, right? Western medicine, but prior to very recent centuries, it can be appreciated that Europe was disease ridden, the bubonic plague, but other diseases. Part of that, it wasn't just that there happened to be diseases there in Europe, but actually you could say that potentially Europe, they actually didn't have some of the protocols and the natural ways of understanding as other people, right? So in Europe, right, like say the last 500 to 1,000 years, as we're given history in Europe, a lot of that was disease ridden, but also a lot of that was exactly when the church was having sway, right? So the formal church, right, the remnant and the furtherance of the old Roman Empire, that is, I think the person Constantine would be part of that. And I think that sometimes when you say we're in the year 2025 of our Lord, what you're saying is we're in the year 2025 of the modern Roman Empire, according to Tashrik Bey, is what you're saying with that, the weight of that, but it's also the arbitrariness of that. Some of the church, I think, I'm extrapolating, the church limiting natural ways of being, that is the wisen people, the people that were derided as that were dismissed as witches. They may have actually been sturdy around the land, and they may have had the key insight to the land in Europe as it existed then. To belittle them, to deride them, and to call them, to designate them as heathen or pagan, and throw away their ways to an arbitrary top-down authoritarian structure, and the implications that would have, that would amount to feudalism and the realities of that. I'm extrapolating that might have lent itself to some of the diseasedness of Europe in recent centuries, up until very recently, and you could extrapolate to the present day, because a lot of our Western societies to the present day are disease ridden. And if they're not disease ridden, the lifestyles lead to death the same way that disease would. And as a part of disease, but not limited by disease, had been the death like that. But it's part of the arbitrary, top down, authoritarian structure, neo feudalism, that actually limits human understanding, not least of which understanding around things like the removal and what to do with human feces and stuff like that. So, according to some people, would say that the Moors had afforded Europeans understanding about sewage and actually civilized some of Europe. Because sometimes you think that, okay, so Europe is so civilized, right? So we have the Eiffel Tower in France. Europe is this civilized, right? But if you go not too far back for that, Europe was actually very ratchet, like fighting upon centuries long wars. They're not the only one that had wars, but to actually have centuries long wars, that's a lot about Europe there. The disease of it, the poverty of it, where there didn't had the need to be that much of poverty, that is bad news. But it had a lot to do with Europe, and part of getting away from that, because they were so, it was so bad in Europe that they had to get away from it. That's how you know it's bad, when you had to get away from it. But some people say you can't get away from yourself, right? So they brought a lot of those notions that would make life arbitrary enough to get diseasedness to they had the ability to flee Europe. I'm extrapolating that the settlers, the pilgrims, they were able to evade Europe, that is, evade themselves partially by the knowledge of seafaring that they either re-engineered, reappropriated, bastardized, or were bequeathed by the Moorish people, just simply because the Moorish people were seafaring before they were. And also, the Moorish people are appreciated as landing in Spain, and Spain is appreciated as giving us the crusades that settled that amounted to reaching the Americas, had been Spain, but before Spain had been the Moors. So you could say that that was an indigenous understanding of the Moors, indigenous to Africa, that gave them that. The melanated indigenous people, the Moors, that is, gave the seafaring capacity, I'm extrapolating, to come to the Americas. Then in the Americas, so this America thing, this America business, this Constitution business, right? This America business, the rigors of the land itself, but also the human beings upon the land, not the least of which the people already there and the people coming there. The actual cooperation to settle that. You don't sometimes you don't appreciate that some of the understanding that the indigenous people of the Americas blessed the settlers with. It wasn't only understanding the land in itself, the actual the eccentricities and the advantages and disadvantages of the land. It wasn't only that. It was how to cooperate with one another. That is, how to share. The settlers had to run away from Europe because there wouldn't have been a problem with Europe. There had been a problem with, they didn't know how to share in Europe. So they had to run away from not sharing. Probably a little bit of not caring in the first place, but not, they probably have been, they didn't care. So therefore they didn't share. So they couldn't stay there. So they had to get away from there. And then they got help because someone had shared with them how, someone had cared enough to share how to get away from there. So then they got away from there. They probably had more care in sharing to do that. And it would be interesting. Did any of those actual that fleet, that armada, did that armada have Moors on there? Because they say that, oh yeah, that the Christopher Columbus and them, they had some Africans with them, right? For lack of a better word, they had Africans. Okay, but you're taught that those Africans had nothing better to do than to be up under them likely and be their servants likely, right? Right. But did those Africans not also have to do with some of the navigation, right? We're just extrapolating, right? Because we know a lot of those textbooks that we grew up with, they're about as good as firewood now, but they might have been about as good as firewood back then, right? And if you would have asked some sturdy people, what should we do about these books that we got? It probably been the best thing to do would have been to use them as firewood. We would have been more enlightened by the books as fire, as good times over fire and warmth over fire, and maybe love making over fire. It would have been better than whatever they had got around to teach us in those books, such as construing that the Africans that would have been present on those original expeditions would have been nothing more than boys and servants and girls, right? But I would extrapolate that you might have had some sturdy ones, no less than Moors, on there to help them have to do with getting here. I would imagine that. But then what to do, where to go when we got here, and to meet the exact. So you think about this, right? So like nowadays, you say you go to California, right? California is that's a great place of indigenous people. That is the land of Khalifa. According to Tashrik Bey, when you say California, you're saying the land of Khalifa. When you go to California, California is a great land, a land of warriors. We know we would appreciate the warring in California now as gang banging, but I think that if you look at gang banging now and all the way back, it had been tribal. But then on top of that, you have drugs, money, that is coercion, and counterintelligence, that is like the actual the underhanded stuff that would go on to ratchet up what you would call gang banging. But within that and prior to all that is tribalism, is tribes. That is some of your great tribes of Khalifa, like the Malibu people of California, and some of your and the people of I think they would call Old Meckham. I can't speak to Old Meckham, but I know that Old Meckham are great people. So your people of Mexico, Old Meckham, there had been great people then, and they're still the same people now. And that's part. I don't know that Mexico and Khalifa is exactly the same thing. I don't know how that actually would before the bastardization of arbitrary lines of like colonialism. I don't know how Mexico and California exact. They were probably distinct regions, but they probably had a lot of traffic back and forth because nothing's isolated, the one from the other. But these are great people. The Mayan people of Mexico, the Aztec people, the Inca people, those are great people. Also, the people of Khalifa, like the Malibu people of California, those are great people. But you go to, so you imagine, so the people been people, right? The people they've been warriors that whole time. In California, they've been tribal warriors that whole time. Khalifa, going all the way back before your books, they have been like that. Mexico, all the way back before your books. The Eastern United States, all the way back before your books. The Central United States, all the way back before your books. The Western United States, all the way back before your books. The Northern United States, all the way back before your books. Canada, all the way back before your books. Alaska, all the way back before your books. Central America, all the way back before your books. South America, all the way back before your books. The Caribbean, all the way back before your books. These have been warriors that whole time. They have been sturdy that whole time. They have been good to go in the outdoors without your bullshit like that the whole time, and to handle problems the whole time, including people, including themselves, including other people. They have been sturdy around all that, right? So you just show up here, you didn't know where you're going, and you show up in the land of warriors, right? You could say, so a better word than the Americas would be the warriors, right? They say the Golden State Warriors. I'm sure you had warriors up and down the Golden State, but the whole Americas had been warriors like that. The whole earth had been like that. Europe too, like that, right? But no, that's the Americas, right? Had been warriors like that. Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna throw a stone on this earth and not be liable to bump the foot of a warrior and have that foot go right up your backside like that? Where on this earth can you throw a stone and not meet a warrior? Such that when you go somewhere, you got to tap in, right? You got to check in somewhere, right? If you're being honest, man, that's some shit. So there's some lessons that everyone's gonna learn in this life. You don't mix business and pleasure. We're gonna get to learn that in this life. You don't play with truth and history, right? You don't put truth into history where someone ain't asking for the truth and they just want history, and you don't take truth out of history when somebody wants the truth of something, right? We know that. But you don't travel without permission. Let's be honest like that. That's what, if we're so what is the difference between a kid and a grown up? One thing I know is that kids need permission slips to go places, and grown-ups need permission to go places. Also permission slips to go places. Adults do too. If you know that, you're an adult. Kids don't know that. That's why they're kids. That's why they need to sign someone their permission slip. But adults still need permission. So you happened to float to the land of warriors, and you were good to go like that, right? You didn't need a check in. You didn't need to know nobody. You didn't need help getting there, and you didn't need someone to say to vouch for you to get over there, right? I call cap right there. So K through 12 education in the United States, the Board of Education in the United States, the settlers came to America by happenstance, and they were good to go without help getting there, or actually or without a pass to be there. I call cap right there. I just call cap. I'm not calling cap on everybody's education, but the part that's been approved, K through 12, as we had the books in school, I call cap right there. Um, so so um um so but the only reason I'm saying, the only reason that we have, I'm saying that the freedom in the United States, in America, is awesome. It's coveted by the world over, and rightly so. Some of what you can do for yourself and with yourself and for other people and with other people, both in the United States and away from the United States, was possible from the United States. A lot of that is rock and roll. It had not existed anywhere, I don't think, before, likely, if we're being honest. Such as why not, it's not better than other places, but it's unique unto itself, the United States, some of the blessings of it, such that people from all backgrounds, people from all parts of the history of the United States, a lot of them would be willing to fight tooth and nail to the present day for the United States Constitution, that is. So what I'm saying is that I think that the reason that the United States has had freedom and has had different bounties that have been enjoyable and coveted, if not relished, the world over, however people feel about the United States politics, the actual realities of the freedoms and the blessings and the furnishings of that in terms of culture and also manufacturing and economics was worthwhile in that. It's because the pilgrims were sheltered by the traditions of the that is the harmonies of the indigenous people, no less including the principles that gave us the Constitution that taught them to share. Because the settlers didn't know how to share, so they're in a lot of trouble there. The church was the economic foundation and still is of Western society. The church had been, but it was a lot of problems and it wasn't livable. It wasn't viable. So they had to flee the very thing that was their standpoint to have any livelihood and wherewithal to flee had been the church right there. So actually, you could say that whatever means that the pilgrims had to flee Europe, it would have been probably it would have actually been the actual accommodations and what was afforded to them by the realities of living under the church because everyone had been under the church in Europe like that. So it's not that the church don't give you nothing good. It gave them enough to run away, but then you replicate what you are and where you're from. So they replicated that here. But the reason that they had the footing to do that was because of the traditions of the natural people is what I'm saying. So I'm saying that a lot of people, whatever your background, a lot of people would be willing to fight and die for the Constitution of the United States. And I salute anyone that would be willing to fight that believe anyone who believes in something enough to suffer and lose for it. I salute you and I stand down, including, but not limited to, but including our United States service members going back, if they were to do so for the Constitution, because the Constitution comes from the honesty, the Iroquois people and the honesty among others. At all, if you say that the movie, there's something about Mary says like among others, like to be funny, but that's actually a real academic term. Is that when you know that different people have made that statement, learned people, but you can't quote all of them as you need to. That's called et al. That means and company and others. So the Iroquois on honesty et al. And others furnished the actual understandings and insight into the land, but also the members of the land, which are part of the land, which are one another, which were also the people coming here. That like things like the separation of powers, like that. I don't think that Europe had something like the separation of powers because it was all top down like that. It was like it was from the power the behind the cloth to the clergy to the feudal lords to the serfs and whoever would be up under worse have it worse off than the serfs. It would go down like that, but it's kind of arbitrary like that. But I think that and it can be suffering like that. But whatever we had to whatever breather we had, whatever breather the world has had in terms of culture, enjoyment, and economic equipment, merchandise, anything that the earth has had to enjoy from the unique footing and position of the United States, and what that allows members of the United States to bring of themselves in their talents. People that have any person upon the United States or who has had a footing based on accommodations that emanate from the United States, that bounty is a part of, and it's not different than the actual traditions of the people here, the indigenous people here. So I'm saying that what the world has experienced of freedom and enjoyed of freedom and understands as freedom as it's been unique from America and as emulated and coveted and appreciated and sought in America, it's from the sturdy traditions and teaching of the native people like that. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying with this one. Such as when you're saying that you're willing to fight and die for anything, salute to that in the first place, but that you would do so for the Constitution, and that the Constitution was largely benefited by the Iroquois people, the indigenous people. I salute that. That is, I'm saluting the Iroquois people in the first place, the honesty people and their company, the other people in the Americas, the traditional people. That's what I'm saluting. I'm saying that that's your freedom then and now. Because if you look at your life now, a lot of the things in your life, if you look at the actors in your life and the real goings on in your life, a lot of things in your life hadn't changed like that. So like, a lot of things just hadn't changed a lot in life. It's just different positions within a cycle, but the cycle is the same. So I think that we're so the such that I had a lot more content that I wanted to come through, but it's getting a little bit long with this. But what I wanted to say is that I think that So like okay, um so you had a changing of the guard, right? Like in so in the year, so a lot of people, they may or may not appreciate the leadership that we have in office right now in the United States. I'm not going to be more specific, that the leadership that we have at the highest office in the United States is in office now as I'm making this in late 2025. If you go, I think 9 years ago, late 2016. So you had the 16 election. You had the same office that's in office now in the United States in the year 2025 was the incumbent office in latter 2016, had been like that, had our was about, no, was up for election, and then was the incumbent at the latter part of this year. They would have been in the latest part of 2016. The incumbent office, a lot of the cabinet, not all the cabinet, but the actual the name of the office had been the same at the end of 2016. At the end of 2016, you had a prophecy take place in the 2016, a real prophecy. Now, when the person running for office was coming into office, was running for office the first time, right? Like in 2015. 2015 was a heavy political season, heavy political season. It's interesting. So in 2015, no, wait, no, 2016 actually, no, 2015 into 2016, you had a political campaign fight like you had not seen before. I have not seen a political campaign galvanize people like that. When I was young, you had a similar campaign like Clinton was running, and it was Clinton was like he was like a sexy person to vote for, and he was like kind of like, so like he was the first one. He was the first one who ever he was the first one who ever said that he was he was the he was the first one who ever said that he was hang on one second. I'm gonna pause this for one moment because I had something serious I gotta look into. One second. I'll be right back. Hey, I was I'm sorry if that was janky, but I want to finish this point because I think it's significant. Clinton was like, so Clinton was the first one that came out and confessed to puff puff pass, that he didn't amount to puffing anything, but he amounted to passing anything. And when he was running in the 90s, he was the puff puff pass candidate that it was a little bit dicey to roll to like Clinton, and it was like kind of in, and he was kind of hip, but he actually did change a lot of things. Like a lot of things have changed with Clinton. Like the worst thing that probably changed with Clinton is like people would talk about like his the bills that he did with crime. But I think that also he may have done some things to just change the climate in the country. Like here go an actual president that's candid enough to say that he had actually passed something around a party before. That's really bold that he would do that from that position like that, because anything you say in life out your mouth is very pivotal, that you would say it out your mouth. But when you do things from a certain position of power, like if you're in a car and you start cussing at everybody, that's one thing. But if the driver of the car start cussing at everybody, that's different because of the power differential in the driver's seat. Like I'm a school bus driver, right? Everybody has less than pretty things to say in a school bus. But if the driver of a school bus say ratchet things out their mouth, or they come on the radio and they say ratchet things, that's extra ratchet because they're in a position of leadership, but also they're in a position of power, and they actually have people's mental, emotional, and physical health in their hands to different degrees. A driver does, but our actual head honcho from the driver's seat of the country was like that, and he was conceding to puff puff pass. That was incredible. But then also the different activities that he would do that have to do with like interns and stuff like that later. That he would do that, or that would even be broached or like a topic from the office that he did that what he was appreciated as doing in the Oval Office, that would look also oval from the Oval Office. That's incredible. What he would. That's ratchet. That's actually how you spell the word ratchet. It's just the rumor and hearsay of what our president had been accused of at that time. It went over. I heard that as a child what he was accused of, but I didn't actually know how significant that was, that you would have that activity taking place from that office of leadership with the cameras on like that. I gotta tap out of this one. I'm gonna come back with more content along this line, and I want to keep going with this. But thanks for anyone for rocking with me, and I'm making some heavy statements, but I submit these to truth and with humility. Peace.